The interview you are about to listen to took place like a week and a half ago. I premiered it during the Epic Marathon live stream that happened on August 14th, but it is with Nina Power, a controversial philosopher from Britain. She is controversial because she believes that people should talk and that extremist views should be researched and that people who are thinking through such positions should be able to participate in civic society, and also that the word right wing has become some kind of slur used against anybody distrustful of the regime, of power, of anything going on really that you're supposed to nod along with or at least not question, right? And of course, we could see all kinds of examples of that. For instance, just like if you question things and if you don't exactly trust everything that you hear through the news media, you might be labeled a conspiracy theorist, even if you're not one, right? They'll start drawing comparisons between you and QAnon people, even if you're not one. This has absolutely terrible implications when it comes to any kind of organizing of a movement that would represent the interests of the overwhelming mass majority of human beings who want things like health care or to be left alone by government interventions or to not have to work their entire lives for faceless corporations that are going to overwork and underpay in unsafe environments. Really, this has implications for anybody who cares about the future of humanity. If you're not able to say things that you might even disagree with, or if you're not able to have conversations with folks that you might disagree with, are you even thinking? Is thinking even possible? This is all very important. And of course, after a certain point, it's going to feel like we're beating a dead horse here because this keeps coming up. But I think that the overwhelming majority of the content that is published at Theory Underground isn't related to this issue. This issue, though, isn't going away anytime too soon, which is too bad. So we ultimately have to be able to talk about it. Otherwise, if we don't, we'll surround ourselves with cowards and the kinds of people who just repeat scripts. Scripted nonsense, right? We don't want that. If we're going to use this internet thing, then we're going to do it to try to have conversations about whatever is provoking us in the moment, whatever we're not supposed to be talking about. And ultimately, hopefully, more philosophically based conversations that are able to give us some kind of a new orientation, some kind of a new conception, some new understanding of our current situation so that we can respond to it locally, globally, and also on the internet. I'm David McKerracher. This is Theory Underground. And if you want to hear more about Theory Underground, stick around until the end of the video. Listen to the PSA at the end. I've got all kinds of really important information at the end. But for now, here's a conversation that I had with Nina Power and Anne Snellgrove McKerracher. All right, everybody, welcome to Theory Underground, and especially to you, Nina and Anne. How's it going?
Excellent. Nice to see you guys again.
Yeah, you too. Excited to all be in this web space together.
Yes.
It's better outside, but this will do.
Yeah, we got to last time we did an event together in June, and then what was it, like the next day or like 2 days later? Like we did an interview, walking around, talking.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of fun. But since that time, a lot has happened, mostly camping and time with family and new life being brought into the world and precious, wonderful things that we've gotten to experience. And it's been mostly just the best summer of my entire life. But through the midst of all of that, one thing that happened was you were, crucified again. As
Yes.
Pierre's joke goes, right? So let's say a couple things just for anybody who's coming in who knows nothing about it at all. Let's see if Anne, can you summarize it in a couple sentences, and then Nina can kind of like add on anything she wants to add to it.
Oh, okay, sure. So you were crucified, canceled, what, 6 years ago, give or take? Um, and then there was some drama with a guy named Luke Turner on the internet. He was saying some things about you and your friend Daniel Miller, calling you all the good things, Nazi, anti-Semitic. You two said, hey, please stop. He said, no. You guys said, okay, we're gonna take this to the court for a libel/defamation case. He said, I'm gonna come back at you for a case against or harassment claim. Went to the court. The case went in 2023. No one won. Like, both of you walked away spending a lot of money, and the judge said, yeah, neither of you wins this one, sorry. And then like a month ago, Luke Turner's like, oh, hey, look at this court case. Here's some screenshots of this case that actually do prove that Nina and Daniel are Nazis, because they said they want to read Mein Kampf and joked about being Nazis. And then the whole internet was like, oh my God, this proves that she's a Nazi. And then, oh, and you had to pay for all of his court costs because you and Daniel brought the libel case. And I don't know how that works in London, but that's made it so that you two had to declare bankruptcy because you can't pay £1 million. And here you are, bankrupt.
To be fair,
out of Compact Mag.
To be fair, Luke Turner couldn't pay £1 million either. It's his daddy who had to do it. So, womp womp womp.
Yes. So pretty good. Not bad. The only thing I would add to what Anne summarized was that I mean the point about defamation is that you're making factually untrue claims, right? It's not just this matter of opinion. So we didn't sue on like calling somebody mean names or whatever. He claimed that Daniel had written an article defending Hitler called Towards a Hitlerian Disability Politics. He kept that claim up for months, even when he knew it wasn't true. He claimed that there was a police investigation into death threats when there wasn't. He also claimed that I was involved in a violent anti-Semitic harassment campaign. It's not just calling somebody a fascist or a Nazi, although that's completely stupid and untrue. But like, it was like there's a distinction between matters of fact and matters of opinion. And we simply sent him a couple of letters saying, can you please stop doing this? And it wasn't just tweets. It was web pages. It was emails to everyone we worked with. It was like a full-on kind of vindictive harassment campaign, all because we tweeted a couple of things at him saying like, you're lying. Like, can you stop doing this? And he had been bullying other people. We were trying to stand up for them. So it was kind of people trying to step in and kind of defend their friends, basically. And I stepped in and tried to defend Daniel, who's defending Diana Havas, who's like, who'd made a joke. I mean, it's just like a level of, I don't know, crazy vindictiveness that is not normal. Like normally, if there's a problem, you either step away, which we did, you just never interact with that person again, or if it's somebody you care about or and you want to be friends with them, you might be like, oh, I'm sorry about this misunderstanding, can we talk about it? And if it's still not resolvable, then you just go your separate ways, which is after all what the judge said at the end of the trial, like just go your separate ways. And we're like, yes, please. We got locked into the case. This is the other thing. Yes, we bought the case, but we couldn't back out of it because he'd paid for such expensive lawyers, Mishcon Derea, like some insanely expensive lawyers, and he refused to negotiate or discuss. We had a mediation in which he refused to speak to us. So, and the woman running it, like a professional mediator, she said that like in 30 years of her experience, she's never told anyone not to settle, but she was telling us not to settle because the offer, he was in inverted commas, was so bad, it would have meant that we would have had to accept liability for harassment, which we didn't do, and he lost that claim. It would have meant that we would have had to pay his costs anyway, and that we would have been bankrupt anyway. So we had to take it to court, basically, because we weren't going to admit that we'd done something we hadn't, and he was trying to force us to do that through sheer weight of money. Defamation is a rich man's game. That's the truth. We raised 30K through crowdfunding back in 2019, and then we had lawyers working for us for free. So we had a completely asymmetrical situation, and we both lost, which actually in a way isn't bad, because it shows that his claim was completely bogus. He only did it basically to lock us in the case. And we lost not because of his claims weren't true. He admitted he lied. He admitted there was no Hitler article, that the police investigation, he called the police, but there was no investigation, right? Like, if you'd sent someone death threats and they were serious, and you know what I mean? Like, if they actually existed, the police would investigate you, right? They'd come around to your house. They'd maybe take you in for questioning. Do you know what I mean? Like, none of that happened. And he was merely saying it in order to slander us, like to defame us and make claims that weren't true, as well as lose us work, which he was doing. So we could prove that there was harm. The problem is he didn't admit involvement in some of the most dangerous, damaging claims that he'd made. He simply said it wasn't me, even though his name was all over them. So, for example, like Penguin got sent an email that was so awful, so defamatory, and so frightening, and that my agent dropped me. And it's not because people believe, this is the thing about cancel culture. It's not that people believe the claims, right? They do not think these claims are true. They're simply frightened, that they don't want to be next. They don't want to be involved with anyone who's being attacked by someone else. It's like, this is what happens when someone's being bullied. You know what I mean? It's like, either you have options. You can join the bully, right? And then you're not next, right? So you're like with the bully. You've made an ally with the bully who's attacking the person, whoever being attacked. You can step back and say, this has nothing to do with me. Maybe the person being bullied did do something wrong. Who knows? Like, maybe no smoke without fire. Maybe they did deserve it. I'm going to tell myself they probably deserved it because I can't think this through. I don't have time. Or you can try and defend the person being bullied, which is what we tried to do. It's very, very, very hard to stand up to people who are extremely rich, extremely motivated, and extremely unusual, let's say, for want of a better word, socially speaking. Like, people who are inflexible to the point of just not even acknowledging that you're human, like not willing to talk to you, not willing to negotiate, not willing to, say, well, maybe, okay, I lied about this, but you were mean to me. You know what I mean? Like, nothing, just absolute relentless insanity for like 5-6 years. And I've never encountered anyone like this. And I think this kind of experience, well, it's an experience. What can we say? It's interesting, right? And it's also interesting, and maybe, sad, interesting, is that a category, to see how people behave, right? But what's really interesting, good this time, is just how many people stood up for me. Yes, Compact, sort of folded, let's say. I tendered my resignation and they accepted, because partly, I don't know. I didn't want to tank their project either. Like, I didn't want to, because then it would be like every time I published an article with them, they'd get hassle and whatever. I was just like, okay, fine, I'll follow my sword, whatever. And
I said publicly, like, when this was all happening, like, I think Daniel like retweeted the fact that you had resigned, and like people were acting like this is like a gotcha, and like people were DMing me acting like this was like a gotcha, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll be canceling my subscription. I was like, okay, bye. Like, that was my position. I didn't realize that there was this level of professionalism to it, where you're kind of like, no, like, let's keep like, I get it, because like in the midst of the thing, damage control is almost impossible. Yeah. There's nothing that can be done except to give it time. Because the people who have borderline personality disorder, and the people who are sadistic narcissists and psychopaths, the people who get off on these kinds of things, they're usually not so put together that they can maintain it for more than a couple weeks. Like, they fizzle out, they burn out, they end up in psych wards, whatever. And then like thinking people who have stepped back and kind of reflect and parse through things and come forward. And, I, at this point, like, had already looked into it enough to be able to go like, well, the screenshots people are sharing are not enough to back up any of the things that they're actually saying. And so it's,
No,
I don't need to step back. I can definitely just say, that's bullshit. That's stupid. That's not enough to go off of and to call someone something that can justify throwing bricks at them in some people's minds. Right. And so I'm hoping that the people who know you a lot less or perhaps know you better than me, but who are cowards, are going to slowly but surely put on their big kid clothes, tie up their belts, and write apologies and or clarifications or supports, but also like we can't really expect it. It's still pretty early into the age of cyber history. And so people aren't sure about how to handle these things yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to give a very honourable mention to Stan Goff and James Robb, who are two left-wing writers who actually thoroughly investigated the situation and both wrote really, really thoughtful, calm, rational, reflective, truthful, factual pieces about the whole affair. I wrote a response on my Substack. I mean, by the way, Substack is fantastic. I left X. I deleted my Facebook. I was going to delete it anyway. There's been a kind of, in the meantime, kind of huge crackdown in the UK. We had like various riots. The Starmer government, the Labour government, I hate Keir Starmer. He oversaw the repeated prosecution of Alfie, my ex-boyfriend, who was nearly killed by the police. And Starmer is an absolute tyrant. It's so obvious as a prosecutor, he's going to use every single aspect of hate speech legislation. He's going to massively expand social media control, surveillance, and so on. So we've already seen people go to prison for like emojis and like Facebook posts and stuff, following the right. Anyway, that's all going on. So there is a situation in which like there's a micro and a macrocosm, and one has to remain sane and not kind of stay sane and not get mad, but like the kind of taking these chats out of context from, they weren't online, just to be really clear, these are private WhatsApp messages that we shared with his lawyers. We volunteered them in order to demonstrate that we were not harassing Luke Turner because we were not talking about him, right? That was the point. There's 200 pages of just random late night incoherent chats between two friends in a situation in which we're both pretty ostracized. What's really going on, I think a lot of what's really going on is there are many people highly motivated. Well, no, not many. There's a small number of very highly motivated people, some of whom are in academia, some of whom are in the sort of verso left, kind of pro-trans activist type people. Most of them are not trans themselves, who really want to force this connection between a gender critical position, a position that says there are two sexes and you can't change sex, and perhaps women could like keep some spaces or whatever, maybe their own sports or whatever, who knows, but at least can we have a discussion like before we change language and reality, please? And every time everyone has been very gentle, they've always been like socially murdered, because it doesn't matter how nicely you put it, but they really want to say, they want to force a connection between a gender critical position, which is largely a left-wing position. It's the position of the left, feminists forever, right? Like that women exist and, that has meaning. They want to say, no, this is a far right position. So they're desperately trying to kind of force a connection. So by taking out of context jokes where I say, oh, lol, I'm definitely a Nazi, by which I mean in the context of the current ideology, my disapproving of some piece of woke nonsense would put me on the wrong side, because, literally anything, if you don't agree with whatever the incredibly stupid terms, renders you a Nazi in these people's eyes. That was obviously the joke. It's so obvious. I say lol at the end. It's very much like this witch hunt confession. It's like, she said she was a witch, and it's like, yes, but you were like strangling her at the time, or like saying that you would kill her family if she didn't, so but like the idea that someone might be joking, and I think these people know it's a joke, they're pretending. These people have PhDs in like critical theory and literature. The idea that like there's one way of reading a sentence, or there's one meaning to words and we know what it is and we're going to control it, is just authoritarianism. I think they're talking complete bollocks. Like, we know that they know that it's not true. They just want to try to, in this propagandistic way, say any woman who says that sex is real and the true sex is and you can't change sex is a Nazi, and here's proof. And therefore, you know, like you had this ridiculous video by this guy who I don't even really know, but he did this video, some called Roosh or Vaush or something. And he did this video where he put my face and J.K. Rowling's face in a swastika and said, like, the most evil person in the world. And then it was this kind of guilt by association, which is also their logic. You know, it's all like, so in the trial it was, well, you interacted with your research account, although they didn't say it was a research account, but that's what it was, because I didn't have a Twitter account.
They called it an anonymous or a SOC, you know, account, right?
Right. No. I mean, it was literally just a random account. I didn't have a main account, right? Like I was just I was following masculinist weightlifting accounts and stuff because I was researching my book on men, and some of which tweets and everything are in my book, right? Because I was talking to people about, you know, masculinist and manosphere stuff. And that's like totally allowed. Like people are allowed to do that, you know, and have anonymous accounts or pseudonymous accounts, you know, and it was set up way before any interaction with this guy. And any interaction I had was deleted almost immediately, guy. And all I said was like, you're a liar, and you know, that you, I think you're paranoid and you need to get some help. Daniel did say some slightly meaner things than I did. And I would like to say that there is a separation, not that the judge made a separation. She seems to treat us as if we're the same person, which we're not, which is very bizarre and slightly disrespectful. But I said different things. I'm not saying that Daniel doesn't have the right to say them. And in fact, Daniel did apologize in court. He said, look, I'm sorry that I was ill-tempered. But none of these tweets existed more than a day. Like, we deleted everything. He only had them because he screenshot everything. I didn't even know you could screenshot in 2018. And also, why would you? And anyway, it's all very, very, very stupid. Like, clearly,
we weren't really there yet. Like, there is a point, I think, in the last 10 years, somewhere along the line, it became evident to me that you cannot DM people as a way of life on the internet without some of that randomly, you'll never know what, eventually getting out, because there's just some people are really prone to leaking screenshots, to the point where I'm like, oh, that's the medium. Like, that is the medium now. The medium now is like, you think you're in private, but in reality you're not. But we didn't know that in 2018. No one knew that, you know, and I don't think nobody would have become reliant on these platforms if we had known that was going to be a thing. Well, but, you know,
I mean, there might be a case of saying, you know, like, you know, in a way, I don't care. Like, I don't care for my stupid WhatsApp. You know, we gave them to the court. Like, these were private WhatsApp chats. They were never supposed to be online. He decided, this is the thing, like, people are always like, oh, they just appeared. It's like, no, they didn't. Like, this dude actively decided to put them out, right, in order to try to, like, ruin me. Like, it's not like some neutral act, like, oh, here is some information we've just discovered. It's like, this was a deliberate act of war, you know, despite the judge saying, walk away, which is what we did. I didn't even mention the trial. I have, since it ended, I didn't say a single thing. No. Right, because I was like, okay, we both lost, end of, you know. She said walk away, let's do it. I got on with my work with Compact, you know, my own projects, and that's how I thought it was. I had no idea, because I'm apparently incapable of thinking about how someone like this would behave. I never suspected that he would do such a thing. Perhaps I should have. It didn't occur to me, you know, these were private documents in a trial. You know, the idea of putting them online is just like, why would you do that? Especially because it's all over.
Yeah. And I guess, like, why do you think he would do that? Or, to speak more broadly, outside of just Luke Turner as an individual, like, being the subject of not one, but two kind of big cancellations, crucifixions, what insights has this given you about the state of politics, the state of the culture war, the state of the left, and why are people being internet bullies? Like, what do they think they're achieving with that?
I think bullying has always happened. I mean, maybe it's been given different names. I think, you know, there are some people who have a psychological need, it seems, to attack others, maybe because of, like, inferiority feeling on their part, envy, just bad feeling, you know, maybe I can take it out on someone else. You know, I have been bullied quite a lot in my life for the reason. It's like, it's not something I'm particularly, like, proud of, because it doesn't seem to be anything I can, like, particularly do about it. Like, I had like a colleague who was actually sacked, not because of me, but because of other people's complaints when I was in academia for bullying me. Like I've had this at various points where people have like really latched on to me and then somehow decided to sort of like try and destroy me. I don't know. It's like it is what it is, whatever. I think I I think what it tells us is that, yeah, there are some people, I don't think this has anything to do with politics. That's the thing. I think we have to understand this psychologically and anthropologically, basically, first and foremost, right? There may be political words being used. Clearly, there are like black magic words. Like you call someone a Nazi, that's a black magic word, you know, like any association. Like people are terrified. Like people don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to lose social status. They don't want to lose their friends. Everything they're doing to me is the kind of thing that they want people to feel afraid of losing. You know what I mean? They want to say, yeah, but look what happened to her. You know, like you don't want that to happen to you, do you? You don't have the wrong thoughts on this topic or that topic, or, you know. And so there's that. And I think a very small number of people have been able to manipulate of a larger number of people. Like I think it's always like this. This is like the idea of the pathocracy. We can see this in this book, Political Ponerology, by Daniel Lobachevsky. Really interesting book. Might be worth talking about at length at some point. I should have added it to my list. Quite a few people have been looking at this book. He's a Polish dissident. He's trying to track. It's almost like what happens when societies go wrong. And I've been looking into kind of the Stasi and this use of Zersetzung, which was this technique of decomposition, which was psychological warfare that was carried out by volunteers. This is the interesting thing, right? So like I have at least 3 people who have like dedicated vast tracts of the last 10 years to trying to destroy me. Zersetzung always worked in threes. They were all volunteer citizens. They basically set up campaigns to destroy people on the basis of, you know, them being kind of subversive to the regime, right? To the East German communist regime. So it was they often went after actors and writers and people who were kind of trying to live in a way that was outside of the politics. They also went after clergymen, people who ran youth groups and so on. Very interesting, very revealing, actually. This is what The Lives of Others is about, by the way. I don't know if you guys have seen that film. Very, very good film. Maybe more in broad terms, rather than the kind of specific details, but it's a very, very interesting film about the psychological motivations, also questions of envy and desire, rivalry, and so on, how these actually play out politically and in very oppressive and authoritarian systems. So I think this is not really necessarily about left and right. It's not really about politics. It's about when systems are not strong enough to stop certain pathological kinds of behavior, which are fundamentally antisocial, from becoming very dominant. So people will go along with it out of fear. And I can see this in people like oscillating about me, like they're like, oh, well, I always maybe thought there was something wrong with Nina, and like I didn't agree with her about this, and like, you know, this just goes to, you know, like this kind of like performative thing where people are like, oh well, I spoke to her once, but you know, now this just goes to show she's like beyond the pale, and you know, this kind of thing. And people are kind of fascinated as well, because it's also like their fear and their desire, so their libido gets tied up with it, because they're like, yeah, but like what if I were cancelled, you know, like wouldn't I be free? Like then I could say whatever I want. And it's like I don't have any really, really dark secret thoughts. It's like, you know, no more than anyone else, you know what I mean? Like we all have like fleeting moments of like, oh, you know, this is a weird thought, like this is a dark thought. What if I punched this person in the face? You know what I mean? Like this is what it is to be human.
I'm gonna be like Walt Bismarck here and say, well, yeah, you would say that because you're a woman. Oh my God, he did that to you so many. He did that to you so many times in that conversation. Yeah, Anne and I both listened to it. Like that was I think the first interview you did after all of this stuff happened, or through all of this stuff happening, and then you did that Unheard interview, right? And so for me personally, I'd like to spend probably the last half of this talking about some stuff that's not just this, because there's stuff that there's stuff that you're working on, there's stuff that you're excited about. You look healthy, you're beautiful, you've got books, you've got plants, you've got you just got married. Congratulations.
There you go. It's true.
We love it. And we love to see it.
Fortunately, Fortunately, my husband is not an internet person. He thinks that the internet is for watching cat videos, like a good, normal, healthy person. Like, this is how he uses the internet. Literally, he watches cat videos, which he then sends to a friend in America. Like, that's the internet.
I would follow.
I love that.
I would follow an account of his just sharing cat videos just because.
Yeah, we'll have to send him some videos of our cat.
He doesn't even post. It's literally just this, like, you know. So he's not an internet person, but he does other beautiful, wonderful things in the world, which are, you know, I'm very. It's actually very nice to have like a private life. Actually, like, this is something, and I think, yeah, it's a great form of like support and spiritual armor.
That's wonderful.
Actually.
But the reason I was going to say that that's kind of like, I don't know, you say that there's fleeting thoughts of like, oh, what if I cheated? What if I jumped off this cliff? What if I drove over the guardrail? Like, people have like a darkness that's always kind of like appearing as possible. Of course, we stand at the edge of the cliff and we get afraid, like, what if I jumped? You know, and that is, you know, the fear of freedom. But the reason I was saying, you know, I kind of wanted to just joke about how every time you had a good point, he said, well, that's what you would say because you're a woman. And then he would like go his own direction and tell you this is what men think. But no, I think that there might be something to that too. And it has to do with like the sharp line in the actual, I mean, maybe it's something between biology and the symbolic and the imaginary and subjectivization and the way that we grow up and all kinds of things go into it. But it's like men are a lot more prone to a Jekyll and Hyde dynamic. And like, that's why they're so overrepresented in serial killings and serial rapings and all kinds of different things where they're able to separate their two different lives, which is why I've been really pushing people to go watch this new movie, Trap, because I think it's a good example of the split, right? And, you know, it's kind of got like this Hannibal Lecter element, but it's like, no, but like Hannibal Lecter is not also like a really good dad. And this is about like, you can be like a terrible piece of shit and also fulfill a symbolic and imaginary function to the point where even if you were faking it, it becomes real. And that's also, I think, speaks to the fact that we're all split, not just between conscious ego and unconscious drive in this sort of Lacanian sense, and that it's all in language, but also like we're split between who we are and what we can become. And, you know, this Pascalian idea of like, you say the words, you pray, and then the belief comes later. Like that, I think that the same is true, like for instance, like a serial killer who wants to be good or wants to play the role of the good person. And it's like the difference between Dexter and the protagonist of Trap gets at this. But I think like every woman who's seen it and who I've talked to so far has had certain kind of like ways of reading it as a text almost, where it's like, I'm like, you know, I think that the guys are a lot more prone to this stuff. And like reading Louise Perry is part of how I'm thinking about that, right? Her case against the sexual revolution. And the fact that like over 70% of males in the United States have this relationship with porn that's very secretive, and then also like usually wrapped up in shame, where it's like they actually agree with her. They agree with her when they're sober and sane, but once they start becoming horny and start getting, then they get a little like, you know, then they have to go take care of business. And it's like, it is kind of like this sharp line between in this analogy, the serial killer and like this normal professional sort of life that someone like a Dexter is able to live. And that's male shit, man. That's weird male shit. There might be like a couple of weird women out there, but like there's a couple. They're probably like less than 1% of the human population, you know? So I feel like men have a darkness that they have to be able to become vulnerable about and communicate with other people. And that Christianity's the only vehicle for that so far. And that is one reason that as people get older, they often kind of just like, well, religion, because it's a place where you can talk about it, and it's a space where there is grace and forgiveness for talking about it. And I think Lacan kind of gives us a way to do that in a secular kind of way, but it doesn't that whole side doesn't get us at the potential higher self that you can cultivate, and that and I just want to say this for all the guys out there: you're not a lost cause. Like there's always a way to be a good person. And maybe you have to fake it to make it, but ultimately, I'm just saying, like, women, like, I don't know, the way you describe it is like, yeah, darkness is there, and it's like, I think every guy like has a much more well-defined dark side that they have to manage, and that's, I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, my book about men, which was very talking about kind of compatibility and harmony and humor and play between men and women, and actually trying to defend men in many ways, and talk about the fact that to be good is a choice, and we could all kind of choose to be slightly better, right? Like, I'm not saying we can all immediately transform ourselves overnight into these perfect beings, but there is a choice, right? And I think that the other aspect of Christianity you might be talking about is also to do with this, which is like conscience and you know, and the capacity to decide, like, will I do this thing which is probably not very good for me? Like, okay, maybe not. Like, I can pray about it and then I won't do it, you know. Like, there is a kind of really practical dimension, you know. Or you might say, like, well, as a Christian man I shouldn't watch porn, or, you know, it's disrespectful to my wife, or, you know, it will corrupt my desire and I don't want that, you know. Like, that we all have this choice. And no, women can watch porn too, women can do all kinds of horrible things, like, you know, like, I have a weakness for like particular brand of like horrible crisps, you know. It's like I have to tell myself not to eat these stupid crisps. It doesn't always work, but like ideally I shouldn't eat these damn crisps, you know. um but yes, I mean, one of the criticisms I did receive from my book, um, although I think in a Straussian way, I was trying to say to men, look, you can be good, you can be better, like, we believe in you. It wasn't that I wasn't saying that I was saying that there isn't a dark side, but a lot of men were like, you didn't really go dark enough. Like, you didn't like admit or discuss like the true horror of men in a way. And my husband said similar things, like
Oh,
that and maybe there's a way in which, like, women can't go there, like it would be too devastating for us to really think about what that might mean, and that it's like better and healthier for us to think, well, we can all be better, like I can be better, men can be better, my husband can be better, you know. And in a way, like, we've lost a lot of those kind of guardrails, like, and those forms of social shaming and stigma around, let's say, desire-based behaviors, because the model of the sort of liberal individual is like, desire is good. Like, okay, we might at the very edges be like, oh, that desire is not so good, like maybe you should go to prison. But like most of the time it's like, follow your bliss. And it's like, without kind of thinking about like the social or indeed individual consequences, like, I'm eroding my soul on a daily basis, like, this is fine.
yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, I think like Pride and images and clips from Pride parades in the US just from this year, like, is the example that, okay, we've gone a little too far in this open public embrace of all of your sexual desires, to the point where,
Hello, beautiful listener. I see you. Just kidding. I can't. But I have to interrupt this just really quick to make my own advertisement, my very own. The one that says subscribing, liking, commenting, it actually makes a really big difference. So even if you're just on the free side, shout out to you. Thanks for doing it. Make sure to subscribe and all that. Especially people on the podcast, make sure to say something nice in the reviews. It actually really helps. And I need reviews on every platform, all right? Because I just hate to say it, it matters, you know? I try not to chase the almighty algorithm, but also I don't want to have all of this beautiful content go to waste. And so I'm trying to walk a fine line between quality and quantity. And I come out way heavier on the side of quality, as you can obviously see we do here. But come on, let's push that subscribe button, you know? Let's smash that like button, you know? Like, teach the algorithm what you actually care about, all right? And then maybe it'll show it to other people. That's great. All right, let's get back to it.
like, Pride and images and clips from Pride parades in the US just from this year, like, is the example that, okay, we've gone a little too far in this open public embrace of all of your sexual desires, to the point where at the San Francisco Pride Parade, which this area was sanctioned off for 18 plus, but just like in the middle of the street, they had the kink zone, and a man was being peed on in public. And
In a
that
pool.
images in a
In a
pool, and
swimming pool. People were taking turns. Yeah.
people were being spanked, and even like in the last couple years when Dave and I go to San Francisco, I love to visit the Castro. I'm really interested in the history of like Harvey Milk and his role in kind of the gay movement in San Francisco. I did a report on him in middle school. So I'd love to visit the Castro and just the history. And it's always been like, yeah, truly welcoming area. But the last time Dave and I were there, there's like grown men walking around fully in the nude with like rings around their body parts. And it's like, oh, when did we allow that? And so yeah, it's gone beyond this point where like most normal people would say that's not okay. We don't want our children to see that. Keep that behind closed doors. But yeah, it's with the left and the liberal movement, it's like, no, it's all good, it's all okay, it's all fine. Embrace it, embrace it. And I think what Lacanian psychoanalysis has given me, and I struggle with it, in terms of like, well, it feels like it essentializes us, but it also says you are not your drive, you are not your desire. We can find healthier outlets for this, so it's not all consuming. And so,
that might be.
yeah,
I think all the Lacanians might pull their hair out over that. I don't know. I don't know that most of them would say that. That's where I go, but I feel like I'm deviating. So because in psychoanalysis, it's like the analyst's judge is not to judge things, and it's to help you kind of come into a more comfortable relationship with your desire and your drive to loosen up a bit. Whereas I feel like our position is we're theorizing a new position. We're practicing a new, but what we take seriously is this question of drive. And so in a sort of sense, your drive is you. Now, the question is like, what can your ego do to, when it's sober, when it's clear-minded, to make concrete rituals that can ultimately help drive in its circuit, in its repetition, reterritorialize into hopefully more healthy cathexes. And even if it can't get into fully healthier, maybe you'll never give up crisps, right? You'll never give up crisps. But the question is, can we expand the circuit so that before you've repeated crisps, you've actually done a whole bunch of other things along the circuit that you weren't doing before that now changes your everyday experience, right?
Sure, you know, and like I obviously like don't drink, right? But like to be somebody who is an alcoholic who doesn't drink is also like highly ritualized, right? Or it can be depending on how you handle it. But yeah, I mean, like and all of these kind of, in a way, practices and rituals, and also psychic exercises. Like, so, for example, in a way, like not to get resentful. Like it would be very easy in this situation where I'm being like harassed and targeted and like you know forced to resign my job and bankrupt and being kind of endlessly harassed, like to be like, oh well, I have a very good reason for having a drink, right? Like I've got 20 reasons for having a drink, right? And I could do that, but that would be really 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 bad. Like that would probably like be the end of me, right? And it's like, well, I don't want to die from drinking. Like, you know, some people when they start drinking just can't stop. Like we don't know why. Like it doesn't matter why. Like everybody's probably got a little bit of a thing, like something that they could do a lot more of, or they would if they could, or whatever. And again, like a kind of liberal culture that says like addiction's fine, like maybe you just need this heroin and we'll give it to you. And like I don't,
they say the real problem is just the stigmatization of these things, the stigma. If we could remove the stigma, then less people would overdose, and that's what matters.
But this can't be true, right? Because this is killing people. You know, this is basically saying to people, like, your desire is to die, and that's great. Like, here's how we help you die. And it's like, well, no, actually, like we can choose, like on a daily basis through like complicated means perhaps, but also through social support and meetings and speaking to people and being honest and so on, not to die. Like it is better that addicts don't die. I know this is a controversial, extremely right-wing thing to say, but I think it's better that people do not die of addiction, or indeed of let's say preventable things, you know, things that we could give them social support not to die from. Like this is better. It is a better model of the self if we say to people, you have a choice, right? You do not have to succumb to this desire that you think is you. Maybe it's part of you, but you don't have to indulge it, right? Like this is the problem with the desire self like fusion model, right? It's also just not true. it's not true. People don't have to do things that are bad for them. They can decide and get help not to do them.
Yeah.
And I don't, and there is this element with, and I want Anne to say some stuff about this because I know she's been reading San Francisco over the last year.
Yeah.
But on that note, I almost feel like those people into talking about magic and hyperstition and all of that, the kernel of truth, I think that they're getting at it, and that I think that psychiatry and psychology will both spend hopefully the next 100 years, hopefully not the next 1,000 years, learning from and hopefully correcting for, is the fact that concepts can function like self-fulfilling prophecies. Same with categories. And so when you give people a category and you say, oh, you know how like you're kind of obsessive? You like things to be tidy? Oh, have you heard about OCD? You might have OCD. And then the person looks it up and reads about it, and it makes them more OCD. Oh, you know how you're kind of awkward and like you do things in public and you don't know how to wipe your own ass because you're like a 17-year-old who's kind of like a dork? Actually, you're autistic. And then that person is 25 and they're like, actually, you have to accept me this way. And it's like, dude, wipe your ass. Just literally. Like, we had a roommate like this, and it's just like, actually, you can find a way. I promise you, you can find a way. You can. And here's the thing is like, maybe, I believe maybe in some cases you can't, but we have to assume that the person can, because if you don't assume that the person can, you've given up on that person. And specifically the part of the person that's most important, which is their essence from an existential standpoint, being their potential. You're just saying, no, your potential is what you are. And that's the most disgusting thing you can do to a person.
Yeah. I completely agree with that, and it's like you hear stories in AA, for example, of people that you cannot believe they've come back from the description of their lives, but they have, right? Like descriptions of lives that are just like you would think are basically over. Like people who are so ruined, have nothing, have lost everything, are suicidal, have been arrested 40 times, sectioned 100 times, been in prison, and you're like, wow. And then then they speak, and they're this like really together, healthy, articulate person who's like, yeah, I had a choice and I did this, and I went to AA, and you're like, I can't believe you came back from that. And I think a lot of this, it's interesting. I've been thinking about the class aspect of cancel culture. Like, so much of this is about fear. Like, people, like, they don't want to slide backwards, like the great fear of the middle class striver, which everyone is sort of encouraged to be, and there aren't enough jobs and everyone's competing, and if you can get ready for rivals and stuff, it's basically like, I don't want to slide backwards, right? Like, I don't want to lose my tenuous PMC job. Like, I don't want to lose my social status. Like, I don't want to lose my friends. I don't want to, and like, so there's just so much fear, like controlling people's behavior or complicity or silence or going along with stuff. And that's a huge problem. Like, when people feel this kind of, just kind of terror, and then they just become like conditioned by this sort of authoritarian mindset. And like, no authoritarian mindset, by the way, or very few are ever going to be like, we're the bad guys. We would like you to believe some evil, wrong things, and we would like you to join us in evil. It's like, of course, people are going to be like, but this is what it is to be a good person, and like the Gute Mensch, by the way, is a very important political German category. Like, the Gute Mensch for the Stasi were all of those people who went along with the regime and who were like friends with the regime, and they were called good men. So when people go on about like being a good person, just be kind, just be a good person, okay? It's not that difficult. Don't be a dick. It's like that's the Gute Mensch. That's the like, we are going to socially disapprove of you if you like keep asking these questions, or like saying, hang on, this doesn't make sense. Or what about this group of people? Or whatever. Anyway, but we know all this. Everybody knows everything. It's terrible. And yet here we are.
I think adding Guten Mensch on top of administrative evil, or what is also called the banality of evil, is a really important thing, because people tend to focus on the sort of Arendtian sort of, oh yeah, people go along with these things without thinking. And it's like, no, people are also trying to maintain their social status and the image of what's good. But with that, and is there anything you want to, I want to hand it over to you here.
I think you both said exactly how I'm feeling just about, talking about addiction and these bad sides of people, and yeah, reading San Francisco and just the conversations that I've had with Weve, and seeing kind of everything going on culturally, socially in the United States, especially like in some of our favorite cities like San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, where it's like, I don't want to go to those places anymore because it's just kind of a sad state. And it's like we've just saying, oh yeah, this person, we just need to give them clean needles and give them some money and they just need to live their life on the street, or whatever the situation might be. It's like, okay, well, you've given up on that human being and their potential. And I know all three of us in the work we do, our writings, everything that we read, we're trying to, I think for the most part, understand, philosophize, have discussions about the good life and humanity and what it means to be human and to be good and to make those choices. And so I think we're, in our last 10 or 15 minutes here. And so I just want to turn that to you now with, everything that's going on and all these terrible things. You seem like you're doing really well and you're writing new things and working on new projects. So we're just curious, like, what is next for Nina Power?
Well, children, let me tell you. No, I think no, it is interesting. Like the positive thing I really want to say is like I got so much support this time around. Like in 2018, it was like a different world actually, and I really was like I ostracized. Me and Daniel were like kind of out there, and like everyone hated us, and it was fine. But I'm still very good friends with Daniel throughout this whole thing, and yeah, like how do I put it? Like the more they try to destroy me, the freer and stronger I become. Like I got lots of offers of work. There's some complexity. I have to deal with this like Kafka-esque bureaucracy. It's like when you're a bankrupt, they do all kinds of like weird stuff to you, like the banks and the state and like what you can and can't have. Like they take your apps away and like it's very weird. Like it's very creepy. And you're kind of like this abjected person. Like people speak to you very strangely when you're speaking to banks because you're kind of like not exactly a criminal, but you're like, a sort of like whatever. There's something to be kind of treated at arm's length. And so it's kind of interesting experience. I want to write about what it's like to be a middle-class poor person, like sort of forced into poverty, all of which is completely pointless because there's no money to get, right? So this is all just sadism. It's just like pointless. More expenditure, like, and more thousands of pounds being spent, tens of thousands of pounds being spent to put me through this bureaucracy. And bureaucracy is a kind of evil, right? Like it's kind of, it's there to like make your life difficult, like take time, put you in a sort of like mindset that works against like thinking and speaking and being with other people, but you can get it done really quickly. Like so I'm just being very like compartmental, like okay, do this bureaucracy, like fine. And it's so stupid because they're like, give us a report if your like bank statement, but they've closed my bank, so I can't get access to my records. So I'm like, well, you want the records of the thing that is closed because of the thing, and it, you end up in these like weird Kafka loops, and you're like, well, I can't tell you anything, so there's nothing to say, there's nothing to see here, and yeah, anyway, so that's fine. It's not taking up too much time. I've been writing. Oh, I'm teaching this course on iconoclasm, which is super, super interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'm working with Pierre, who you met at Verdurin. We're hosting it somewhere else, not in his place, but somewhere in London. And yeah, so we've had the first class. It's been absolutely incredible. We had some really interesting people attend, and so I'm trying to think about the history of the destruction of images, icons specifically, but basically the destructive urge vis-a-vis representation. So humanity, if you like, has a kind of choice as whether it represents things or not. And also whether it destroys them, and whether in the act of destruction there is also new things are created. We've seen a kind of whole spate of like neo-iconoclasm, we might say, from a political point of view, where people have been kind of tearing down statues of like slave owners and so on, as if to sort of say, well, we can destroy that history and start again because now we're good people. We're different and kind from these terrible white men, and so we've seen this kind of iconoclastic urge. I think it always is there, like we have it in our own lives, like to destroy, like why don't we destroy our history and like start again. And but yeah, specifically kind of focused, we usually associate with like religious iconoclasm, like So the difference between idols and icons. So like the idol is a problem because we start worshipping that instead of like God or Allah. You know, it's something that gets in the way of our access to the divine or our relationship to the divine. But we also have a kind of earlier version in Plato, where the suspicion of representation, the suspicion of images. Obviously, we can see it in the cave analogy, but there's also a kind of like privileging of thought over representation. So there's a kind of early philosophical iconoclasm, as one writer, Besançon, in his Intellectual History of Iconoclasm, says. Like, he basically argues that philosophy is the original iconoclasm, which is very interesting, because we're focused on thought, abstract thought, rather than the representation. So we have mental images, but we're not engaging in kind of physical creation of images, and that there's a hierarchy set up in Plato, which Besançon says is largely ignored. This is not the popular position. The popular position is images are good. And obviously we now live in this kind of Baudrillardian hyperreal, like the kind of total like sea of images, like all of which have lost their referent. And so then you end up with like, you know, I don't know, this question of post-truth, like it's just a matter of who says what. It's a question of power, like it's a question of, you know, all the things that we see. So yeah, there's a lot going on there. The question of whether natural objects can be icons, like for example, like people cut down this famous tree recently last year, like as an act of vandalism, and like what the difference between vandalism and iconoclasm is. Like, is iconoclasm okay because someone had a good reason to destroy the church or whatever, or the icon? You know, is it okay that people tore down the statues of the slavers because they were well politically motivated, or just stop oil throwing like soup and paint over famous works of art because of like, you know, drawing attention to the urgency of the climate crisis? You know, is that okay compared to someone just sort of going to museum and like smashing a pot because they feel like it? Like really, what's the difference? So yeah, there's all these kind of questions, but yeah, it's fantastic. So I'm trying to write up something about neo-iconoclasm, whether we are in a iconoclastic age, whether there's partly just a fatigue with images, like there's just so many, and so many of them are so horrible. Like we just, maybe there's a kind of desire for sort of simplicity, which you also get in parts of Christianity that become very, very iconoclastic. You know, like we don't need the Catholic excess, like you have the kind of Reformation, like pulling back, or the Byzantine discussion of like whether we should have icons at all. So yeah, so I wonder if like cancel culture is partly like there are too many icons, like whether an avatar or a person can be an icon too. Like, oh, if we just get rid of a few, like we'll be better off, right?
Well, and Mikey, who is going to be on later today, I heard him in conversation with Swolitariat, who I think is also going to be on today's stream. And because Swole interviewed him a few days ago, and Mikey attributed to me something that I heard you say, actually, and you kind of just brushed up against it. And so I believe it was before you left X to go Substack full time, which is a great choice. Everyone should make it. And if you don't even make it, everybody, at least get the app, because the Substack app is fantastic.
Yeah.
You said basically like people are so, you're like, oh yeah, all these things people talk about with cancel culture, there's an element of truth there. But I think what everyone's missing is like, they're so overwhelmed by so much information that people are just relieved to cut something out, to feel justified to cut it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I did write that. I deleted all of my ex tweets, so my entire wisdom is now gone forever. This is like periodically what I do. I never download anything, because I think this battle against like that these things should be ephemeral, right? Like I think, you know, it's the kind of Stasi folder. I bet a folder on you people that like keep everything, you know, and it's like, no, we shouldn't be doing that, like insofar as it's possible. But at the same time, the strategic point is like, everything on the internet is forever, you know, like that's like, but I don't think we should live like that. And I think there's an interesting case to go back to the shame question, like that Dave was saying. It's like, why don't we just admit our shame? Like just go like, yeah, we did all this stupid shit and we watched all this horrible crap, and like, okay, we're not going to do it now, like we can be better, or we can try to be better. But like, rather than living in this kind of mutually assured destruction way where it's like, but you know, you said this in this private chat like 7 years ago, you made a joke about like, you know, that was a bit racist, or, you know, it's like, well, it's like, just say, look, I think this is what Žižek and other people do actually, when they say, look, yeah, like, you know, people do and say stupid, horrible, like unpleasant things, and we have to live with that. And actually, when we make jokes, like jokes are a way of addressing that kind of social awkwardness in order to get closer to people, right? It's not, we're not making jokes to like offend people or upset people. It's like, this is social interaction because it's difficult and there are differences between us, and like jokes are a way of like, I don't know, like getting closer to people, actually, like not at the expense of other people necessarily. Like, of course, we have to be good at it. Like, we can get better at it. Like, sometimes we'll say stuff and it will just fall flat. Like, and we'll just be like, oh, that sucked. Sorry, I was nervous. Like, you know, I didn't mean that badly. I was just like being a dick or whatever. But then we have to admit our own like flaws and failings. And I think a lot of people who are like attacking others just never do that. They never go, oh yeah, I was actually a bit of a dick. To be honest, like maybe I got a bit carried away. Like I was feeling bad that day and I wanted to like beat up on someone, and you were there, and like, you know what I mean? It's like we all have to be like, yes, I suck. Like, but I know I don't just suck. Like I suck a bit, and I'm also like good in these ways, and I, you know, and that's it. But yeah.
That's why I'm teaching this Levinas course, is because I mean, I'm all about reading Marx and Heidegger against one another and to go beyond them, but also as a way of trying to understand the current conjuncture, because it's like you got to strike roots in thought somewhere, and I've made a choice here. But also Levinas is sort of like my antidote in some ways to some of the things I see in such circles, and really like ultimately an antidote to being too in your head and too theoretical. He's like the theoretical short circuit back into just like the actual room. Like he's sort of like an epic bitch slap back into the room. And that's how he functions for me. And I think I can share that with others. That's my goal with that course. And so we're 2 weeks into it right now. And it's kind of my huge project right now. I'm like teaching a sort of introductory lecture for people like Anne who are not doing the reading once per week. And then I've got 2 long sessions at 2 different times in the week, meant to work for everybody's schedule, basically, where I'm going like through the notes and into the translation. And I've never done anything this immersive before. And it's the most fun I've ever had. I was absolutely terrified going up to it, but it's just great. Anne, is there anything that you want to touch on and close here?
Oh golly. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, your positive spirit through all of this. It was really cool to meet you a couple months ago and to be in dialogue. I asked Nina behind the scenes, I'm like, give me your Nina starter pack. Like, what are thoughts and texts that are influential to you and your own thought? And so she just shared that with us. That's exciting. Anything from that list you want to highlight in close, or any book you turned to in the last, month of dealing with all of this?
Yeah, well, actually, Dave I didn't put it on my list, but Dave was mentioning the Gambin book, The Highest Poverty, which is like very interesting in terms of thinking about like being ascetic and like what does it mean to be ascetic in 2024, like when all of your subscriptions have been like involuntarily severed and you can't use like like apps. Like this is like like enforced kind of like electronic monasticism, right? And it's like it's kind of interesting, actually. Like it's interesting to be like really sort of bereft and kind of freeing. And I think this like there's always there's always at least 2 sides to every situation. Like it really is like, okay, I can look at this and be like, okay, this is pretty bad. But on the other hand, it's like, well, actually, like look at all the kind of freeing dimensions to it and all of the intriguing things and like the experiential things and things I can write about. Like, and the thing is, it's like no one is ever going to stop me writing. I mean, like even if they hacked my hands off, right? Like I would do voice dictation, right? Like nobody is going to stop me. Like I just want to say, like you can't stop me. Like it will never work. Like you will only make me stronger. Like
and it's a motivator. It's a motivator. They don't understand I don't think people understand the tremendous amount of, yes, it's negative at first, but once we transmutate that energy into something else, we're absolutely a force to be reckoned with. And it's like, yeah, thanks for making me better. You will wilt away as a little worm, and I will just continue to like smash hit after hit. Keep it coming. It's awesome. But also, like, you know, I love how we were able to do that with this conversation, how we were able to sort of switch gears from all this shit to all this other really cool stuff. And what I would like to do hopefully really soon is bring you back so we could just kind of focus on the starter pack. And I've got questions about the ethics of ambiguity. I've got questions about your selection from Simone de Beauvoir and from Luce Irigaray, because it's not like they're magnum opuses so much as like these marginalized texts. And I really want to get into that choice. And I also really want to ask you questions about going into Mary Wollstonecraft and your annotations and how much you do or do not still agree with yourself, and how much you've kind of evolved when it comes to reading these sort of primary source texts for the people who taught the world of philosophical universalist men that also women do exist. So thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody. And we'll be right back after this.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, a place for workers with earbuds who are tired of letting others read and think on their behalf, slipstreaming our way into an understanding of the situation that short-circuits the deadlocks of our moment.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation: theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
Theory Underground is coming to a city near you. What that has meant in the last year is traveling across the United States, into Canada, and then all over Europe to promote our books, courses, and ideas related to time energy and underground theory. You've been reading Underground Theory.
I'm a publisher and an editor. I run and review books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best editing collection I've ever read.
Okay, picture this scene. America, early 2021. An Amazon warehouse worker arises from the emerging underground theory internet scene to create spaces for untimely topics and concerns that are too often neglected or kept in isolation today. Joined by a revolving cast of underground theorists, academics, and critics, he establishes what will become Theory Underground, a teaching, research, and publishing platform by and for working-class intellectuals, autodidacts, and academics who want to do more than they're able to do within the confines of academia. That warehouse worker's name is David McKerracher, and his book Time Energy is his first major contribution to the world of theory. It was recently reprinted with a foreword by none other than Slavoj Žižek, who also contributed to Theory Underground's latest book.
My Bible, it's an excellent book.
A collection of essays called Underground Theory.
What you just heard is an excerpt from the Strange Exiles podcast, episode 23, where Bram from Strange Exiles interviewed me and Mikey. For those who don't know, Mikey is the author of the Dangerous Maybe blog. We are publishing one of his books here shortly at Theory Underground. He's also a lecturer at Theory Underground, and he's someone I've been friends and a collaborator with for over 10 years. But most importantly for you all, he's a fantastic lecturer, and it's a crime that he has to do wage labor right now. One of the long-term goals of Theory Underground has been now for a couple of years to hashtag free Mikey. That is something that I've been really pushing, but first I had to get freed from wage labor, which was achieved this year. That's right. Thanks to my monthly seminar subscribers, I was able to quit Amazon and do Theory Underground full time. Now I'm announcing the next big phase of the plan, which is the Mikey Down Seminar. What monthly subscribers to the Mikey Seminar are paying for is a survey of philosophy, including deep dives into Žižek, Land, Lacan, Baudrillard, Bataille, Lyotard, and ultimately the whole history of philosophy.
We're trying to build like this ongoing seminar, right? And that's what I really like about this thing, where, you know, if I'm teaching a main text, that's something I got to focus on. I got to really, but the seminar thing, we can do this stuff all the time where we dive deeper into concepts, we dive deeper into certain, sections of books or whatever, and we can really do this nuanced stuff.
I think that there's probably no better way for us to accelerate our learning in these areas than by slipstreaming Mikey. And that has been my belief for years and years and years now. It's official. You're able to help out. You're able to get involved. You're able to benefit directly from liberating him from wage labor. Get on it right now. Do it. Just go. Stop what you're doing. Go click the button, subscribe. This is what you do. Subscribe to him. If you're already signed up for the ongoing Theory Underground seminars, then that's the ones that I do with my wife, Anne. Though that's getting an upgrade, which means that I will be doing one session per month that is just me, and then I will also be doing the ones with Anne, which are a crash course in sociology, anthropology, the social sciences, and ultimately Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, Bourdieu, imminently critiquing pop psychology, sociology, self-help, and ultimately the doxa of our time. But if you would like to be a subscriber to both Mikey's seminar and the seminar that the Snellgrove McKerrachers are doing, then the best way is to become a Tier 4 subscriber, or you can be a Tier 2 subscriber to each of us. The reason this matters is because Tier 2 is like pretty much the best bang for your buck. It gives you huge discounts on all of the courses that we do. But if you can't afford it, Tier 4 is amazing because it gives you Tier 3 access at both Mikey's seminar and ours.
And finally, not everybody has time to be part of these ongoing research seminars, and they just want to fund the paid content for the YouTube and podcast. And so thank you so much to our patrons over at Patreon. They're the ones funding all the free stuff. So big thank you to Bert, Marilyn, Carl, Sahil, Zozandra, Nikolai, Darian, Tyler, and Mandeep, and all the other wonderful patron people. Patreon people. And thank you to all the other wonderful Patreon people. Thank you so much to all of you patrons, and also to the special subscribers and the paying subscribers. Oh my god, it's just so awkward. Thank you, patrons. Okay. And to all the other wonderful patrons, thank you so much, all you patrons. And also a special thanks to the subscribers on the YouTube side, as well as the paying subscribers over at Substack. Why can't we do this? Fuck. You guys,
Please.
just thank you. Thank you, everyone, for making this bullshit possible. Thank you to the subscribers. You did so good. Thanks, guys.